Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Sunday live stream. Today I have Jason Shinpaugh with me, and we are going to talk short-term rentals, Airbnbs, and some passive income. How are you today, Jason?
I am amazing. Thank you for having me.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for being here
You
with
bet.
me. So, Jason, tell us a little bit about you and the rental properties that you own.
Well, I've been in the real estate business for almost 24 years, and I've been through lots of cycles with it. We used to own some long-term rentals, we used to own some commercial properties, different things like that. And I got to get my head in here. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I didn't see that. She moved away. That wasn't that. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just trying to make sure my head is in here. So we've just in the last year or so got into some short-term rentals, and we've been researching it for a few years. And personally, I just think it's a phenomenal way to leverage your property. Far better than a long-term rental. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, that makes sense. So what do you think some differences are between a long-term and a short-term rental?
Well, I think with COVID, one of the things that we realized real quickly was that somebody could control our property beyond us. And that was a huge eye-opening thing for lots of people, because as soon as they put that rent moratorium on, they also didn't necessarily put a moratorium on your mortgage payment that goes along with it.
Correct.
And so I feel like that was just a huge, we had never experienced that at that level. And I think that certainly plays a huge role in people and short-term rentals. But I also think that, just straight up, you're going to make more money on them. If they're in the right market, you're going to make more money. There's a little bit more management that goes along with them, which I think we're going to talk about here in just a minute.
Correct.
But at the end of the day, your return on investment, and especially your cash-on-cash return, is going to be substantially higher in a short-term rental than it is a long-term rental.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're talking just residential right now, because we can talk about commercial and mini warehouse. Well, that's another day. But
yeah, strictly short-term rentals today. So what are the top 3 factors that you look for in a short-term rental property?
Well, obviously, the old real estate slogan: location, 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 location,
Always.
location, location, location. We travel, so we're all over the country, so we're in a lot of different markets, and we get to kind of see. One of the things, and you guys, at the end of the day, I'm going to just kind of stamp my disclaimer on it. These are all just my opinions, nothing more, nothing less. But I feel like something that's super important, especially like what you guys dealt with here in Asheville, which is where Asheville just came in and said, no more short-term rentals.
And Highlands is doing the same thing as well.
And so lots of communities are experiencing that because they don't know what to do with them. And typically it's led by the hotel association. So the hotel association comes in and says, you're stealing my nights. And then the neighbors get behind it, and then because they had a party next door and they left trash on the street, and it just steamrolls. And so communities, unfortunately, oftentimes it's an all or nothing. So they don't know what to do with it, so they just say, you can't do it at all. There's been communities that we've been in that will only allow a certain amount of licenses. So I'm always looking for something that's in an area where that's not going to happen. Okay, there's certain parts of our country where you're never, ever, 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 they're not going to stop rentals. Because there's not enough hotel rooms, there's not enough places to build enough hotel rooms. And the merchants should really not be happy with that, because when they do that, when they put those moratoriums on there, it's keeping more butts from coming to town.
Correct.
Right? So the hotels would still be full. You can still go to these towns, the hotels are still full, and so are the Airbnbs. So really the merchants, the small mom and pop businesses in the middle, are the ones that pay when they put these moratoriums in. So I'm looking for places that are, they don't have that city. A lot of times it's the cities that are cutting it off, because they have a gajillion hotel rooms. Right? So if you think about a city where there's all of these conventions that come in, and they have lots and lots of hotels, they're going to fight it way more than a place that has 30 hotels and 500,000 visitors a year. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were just in Vegas, so think Las Vegas versus Maggie Valley.
Correct.
If that makes sense, where you do have a lot more mom and pops. For sure, that makes sense.
I drove through Maggie Valley the other day. There wasn't one vacancy at any of their motels. Right? So all the motels were full, and most of the Airbnbs were full. Right?
Yep. Always. I mean, this time of year, I had a client reach out to me to find a cabin for Thanksgiving weekend, and right now it just does not exist, unfortunately. we're on the wait list for some cancellations to come up.
Yeah. So I think location is the overriding factor, and then it needs to be somewhere you want to live, or somewhere you want to go on vacation. Because I like, we use our cabin in Pigeon Forge all the time. We're going to go there in a couple weeks. So I think that that's an important part of it. Don't go rent it somewhere you never want to go. I mean, obviously, if the money's good enough, you can do that and justify it. But there's some ways you can do financing if you're going to be using it as a second home. Truly, some of the guidelines allow for that. So, I think that's another very important part of this. Has got to be somewhere that you would want to go and hang out.
Yep, that's right. And something that we do get commonly here is folks looking for a second home that they want an Airbnb. And on that vein, so somebody that's new into short-term rentals, do you recommend that they manage it themselves or get somebody else to do it for them?
I have mine managed. I don't want to mess with it. I just don't want to mess with it, and so I just factor that into the cost when we're buying it. Some people like it. It's all about the cleaning crew you have. It's all about the maintenance people you have. So if you can get great people of that, now you're just managing the bookings.
Right.
But you have to be on top of that. So you have to understand if you're going to do that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, when you get the most of your guests that are coming, especially if you're in a weekend destination. Some places are weekend destinations, some places are week destinations. But understanding the day those people are checking in, you need to be available. Don't be up in the mountains hiking and not have access to your phone, because if there's going to be a problem, it's going to be a problem them opening the door, the heater didn't work, the fireplace is something. So just that first part of it. So if you're going to manage it yourself, right, I think 1 property, 2 properties is pretty easy to do, but you start getting 3, 4, 5 properties, becomes much, much more difficult to manage like that.
Yes. I completely agree with that, honestly. And so your properties that you have now, you're managing them from a distance, right? And the way that you do that is with a property manager. So, Jason doesn't get calls at midnight because the hot tub isn't working anymore.
No, I just get a bill, and I'm fine with that. I just get a bill, and I'm totally fine with it. We just got our last payout from our cabin, and it was the remote wasn't working. It's so much better than me trying to finagle all that stuff. So the cost of doing it is in some markets the management fee is 10%, some it's 15%, some it's 20%, some it's as high as 40 or 50, just depending on where you are and what's included with it. But at the end of the day, like, personally, I don't think it's for me. I'm not interested in that tediousness. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying that's not my thing.
I think a mistake that people make whenever they're looking at passive income is not really looking at it as passive income. They end up buying themselves a job that they actively have to work. So keeping your rentals under a management company is definitely going to keep it more on the passive side for you.
And I think just total sidebar, because I don't like to have
That's
lots
okay.
of sidebars.
We got sidebars all day.
There's that always happens if you're talking to me. Passive income is a very vague, a very, very, very vague thing, because I know people that have 1,000 apartment units. They don't have passive. It's not passive until they can hire somebody to do it for them, where they truly are just collecting checks and they have it ran top to bottom. If you're still standing in line at Home Depot buying toilet parts, it's not passive.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
I mean, so it's just and it's not wrong. It's real. So let's be real about what passive income is. Passive income means a check came to my mailbox regardless of what I did. And so I think that those things can get skewed, and I think oftentimes people are chasing something they can't catch, right? And they're chasing passive income, but they're still managing their properties and going and painting them and do it. That's not passive. That's not a passive income. So I think that bears noting. Yeah,
I agree with that. So on that note, what do you think is the biggest pitfall as far as short-term rentals go?
I think buying in the wrong location could play a big role in it. But the other side of that coin is if you buy in a location that isn't on the radar, right? You may not pay as much, you may not make as much, but you have less risk. So I think it's pretty well accepted all over. So I think one of the biggest pitfalls that I see right now is the control that Airbnb, VRBO has over properties. I've been reading some articles where people are just getting the plug pulled on their property, right? Just because the guest said something, and and they're trying to get through the back end of Airbnb to figure out like it wasn't true, and so they're not getting their right to be able to say, hey, this didn't really happen. This just was a part of it. So I think you have to account for those things. I think there's some different things with being, they call it super host, where you can only be on one platform or the other. Personally, I think you're better off to be on all the platforms you can possibly be on. Our cabin in Pigeon Forge has got bookings from everything, like bookings.com, VRBO, Airbnb, their personal site. Like it has multiples of, it's not just one place. And so I think that to just, obviously benefits to being a super host, and they give you preferential rankings and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's, if they pull the plug on you, now what?
Now where do you go? Now how do you advertise? And then you kind of become at the mercy of the platforms that aren't as readily available to people, for sure.
Absolutely.
So my last question for you, Jason, is what is the best way to get started investing in real estate?
Just start.
You heard it here first. Thank you for all of the love. Thank you for all the love.
Just start, because there's always a reason to not. Your reason to just has to be bigger. And you're going to learn and you're going to whatever. But if you go through and you do it right, the likelihood of losing any substantial money, unless you buy a house that has a foundation crack or it's fallen in a sinkhole in Florida or something like that, you're pretty well going to make some money, right? Yeah. And I think to this point about this conversation, I think a lot of times people think owning more doors is more important, and they're having 100, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 doors that they own, right? Well, until they get those paid off and do everything, they may be making only $50 a door, $100 a door, right? If you think about it, if you had, 4 or 5 Airbnbs that were making 50 grand each, which is pretty doable. You take out all your taxes and your insurance, which you don't ever count your payment, your management fees. You're making a couple $100,000 a year managing 5 doors, right? Yeah. 5 roofs, 5 air conditioners, not 500.
Exactly.
5 toilets, maybe 10 toilets, whatever. You get the point. So I think that part of it plays a big role in it. And everybody has a different threshold, right? I mean, you and I were talking about it, and you're like, I don't really do that. I'm like, why not, right? So I think that's cool that we're having this conversation because I've been encouraging you, like, you should do at least one.
Right. At least try it.
Before you just say no to it because of the things that you... and I think it's kind of funny because when you and I were having that conversation, it was when I mentioned the rent moratorium. You're like, ooh.
Yeah.
That was like... That was like light bulb, right? Right. I get so...
I mean, now the precedent is set with your long-term rentals. Anything... The federal government can come in almost for any reason now and say, these people do not have to pay rent. And you have very, very limited... what are you looking at? very limited options as far as getting your mortgage paid. When the everything started happening with COVID and they brought in the moratorium on mortgage payments, at first it was only government-backed loans. So I always preach conventional loans to buyers because it's cheaper to get into. You're not going to get as low of a rate, but you're not going to have all the funding fees, right? And here we are. If you have a conventional loan, you still have to make your payment. So what do you do as a landlord then whenever you have no protections and you can't ask these people to leave if they're living in your home or in one of your apartments? So short-term rentals are definitely a way to kind of get around that because obviously they're not going to be there forever.
And they're a great way for you to have a vacation home. That's what I go back to earlier, like somewhere you want to live, right? It's very easy to rent out while you're not there and then use it when you're there. So, like I said, there's different financing. I'm not going to tell you all the, it's up to you however you finance it. But at the end of the day, there's very favorable financing terms for second homes. And certainly within the rules of renting it when you're not there. Right. So I think that's a very, very important thing.
Yes, it is. It is. You need to know your local rules and regulations. That's my bottom line for your short-term rentals. Like we were talking about Asheville and the city limits, you cannot have a short-term rental unless it's your primary residence. And Highlands, It's just crazy to me that they are no longer allowing any short-term rentals, and Highlands is a huge tourist destination with like 3 hotels. So, that's a big problem for all of those businesses to just be going under right now. So.
Well, and I think you have no control over it.
Right.
Right, when they just done. So if you're close to those areas, I would encourage you to stay further outside of those areas, because oftentimes those towns that are right next to will annex, right? And so now you're a part of, for example, we're talking about Asheville, right? So if you're in the town right next to Asheville, they just absorb you.
Right.
You're now part of their rules. So being out far enough that you can still be in the middle of things, right? But not so far out that you're, or not so close that you can get annexed in, just like that.
Right, exactly. And also, be ready to pivot. Have your backup plan and be ready to go if something like that does happen. You might want to think about turning your Airbnb into a long-term rental at that point, but rent it at 6 months at a time instead of a year at a time, just to keep yourself a little bit more protected if anything were to happen again. Evelina, what's your question? I vote that topic. Funding and regulations a little more in depth. Woo! You want to know more about funding and regulations right now? We can talk about that. So, Jason, what's your preferred method of funding for a second home?
Well, you can go get a conventional loan with 10% down, which a lot of people don't realize.
Right.
And so to qualify, it's just the rate is very similar to what is a normal conventional rate. And the guidelines say that you have to occupy the house throughout the year. And so long as you do that, then it doesn't say how much time. There's not a requirement. So it's great to go use your place. I think it's also great to go use your place to live in it. Right? If you're going to Airbnb it, go spend a week in it before you turn it loose. And see what you're missing. Are you missing the spatula? Are you missing the whatever? Because you don't know it until you start living there. Right?
Exactly.
And so we go to ours several times a year. We like it. We spend time there because we like it. But we're also like, oh, we need a new coffee maker. Or we need Listen, you guys, this is a total sidebar. If you're going to do Airbnb, don't be the Airbnb that goes and buys the cheapest silverware at the Goodwill and that nothing matches and whatever. Just factor it in one time a year. Go in and replace everything. If it needs it, replace it. Have a matching set of glasses. I've been to them and spent big money to be in places, and I'm like, this is the spatula. It's melted to the nth degree. Nobody cares, And so with our management company, I'm like, literally, there is no expense spared to make it great, right? I mean, I want people to have an amazing experience and relative to the price point that it's at, but I'm not after cutting corners on sheets and blankets and pillows. And we just replaced the beds in our cabin with super high-end beds. We just put a washer and dryer in. It didn't have that. I mean, we're always doing those things. The next thing that I'm looking at doing is putting a supercharger in for electric cars.
That's very smart.
So I'm gonna research that in the off season to see if I can put one in at some reasonable rate, because I think that would be a very big value add as we move more into the electric car world. So
I can't wait to get a Tesla.
Yeah,
honestly, but I think there's a lot of people doing that and being ahead of the curve. Being ready to pivot in these ways and always taking care of that property. You think of the experience that you want to have. Because your reviews, you're going to live and die by them. Like Jason was saying, you don't want to be taken down from a platform just because the bed was uncomfortable and 20 people complained about it. That's a crazy thing. It just hurts your business. So the investment continues with your short-term rentals. It's not just one and done, set it and forget it.
But I think you just have to account for it. Just like anything, right? What's it going to cost you? I mean, literally, you can replace everything for a couple $100. I'm not talking about furnishings. I'm talking about silverware and plates, and if they got a chip in them, get rid of them. Like, you don't want to go there and stay like that, right? And it's funny to me because the people that cut the corners are the ones that are complaining when they go to somebody else's Airbnb. Right. Now, like,
I know how much they paid for this.
Exactly. They did this and they did that, and there's another thing here. Just kind of circling back to things that are important. There's two schools of thought. Smaller Airbnbs, they're obviously cheaper. You make less on them, and larger ones that are, you have the benefit of getting $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, just depending on where they are. Much more money, right? You pay more for it. You have more occupancy, but you also have more opportunity for things to be torn up. And you have 3 families that come in and they have kids. I have kids, so I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't rent to people with kids. I'm just saying, like, if you have 12 kids versus 2 kids,
right,
and you have 3 families, then it just has the ability for things to get broken, and it just has to be factored into your cost of doing business. We prefer smaller things. I think they're easier to manage, and I think that what you're going to see for the foreseeable future is people are still staying in the U.S. because of COVID. Less people are traveling internationally, even though they are. And I think people really, with COVID, got the opportunity to see how amazing our country is and how many phenomenal spots there are that they don't have to go everywhere.
Right.
So I think the short-term market for the foreseeable future in these destinations, wherever they may be, that you find, maybe it's in your backyard or whatever, they're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere in the near future.
I mean, and it's, if you want to vacation out to the woods somewhere, and just instead of camping, you want to get a cabin, you can bring all your own food. As far as COVID goes, you don't have to be in contact with anybody for your entire vacation if you're going with a short-term rental. It's a very safe way to travel right now. And I agree with you, it's not going to go anywhere.
It's only going to continue.
Well, does anybody have any more questions?
I can't read all that. You probably have to. I'm so much older now.
That's funny. He's old. He's older than dirt.
George's always picking away for being the old guy now. I can never tell her again how old I'm going to be.
Well, I really appreciate you guys for stopping in to watch. I hope you got some value today, and definitely catch the replay. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments below, and we're happy to get them answered for you. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Jordan. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.